Ingrid, welcome to the show. Can you remember where you were in 1973, or aren't you old enough to remember?
I'm well old enough. I was doing the maths. I would have been about 6 years old, and I used to play my parents' records over and over and over again. Now, I think my parents were probably not the trendiest people, so I had the Beatles, Mamas and the Papas, Neil Diamond when he was young and his voice was still intact. And I knew those songs inside out, back to front, and loved music ever since.
Well, isn't it interesting? Your children would still listen, I imagine, to some of that music, particularly the Beatles. The Mamas and the Papas were fantastic, of course they were. But we don't listen to their music, really, do we?
Well, my daughter's interesting. She's at jazz school, so she's listening to stuff
good on
from
her.
the 40s. Ella and
Ella Fitzgerald, yeah.
Ella Fitzgerald. My son was fourth in the national beatboxing competition for New Zealand, so his music is completely different, but he did do a really good rendition of a Beatles song. I think it was, just trying to remember, can't remember what the song was called, but very good rendition. So, their music taste goes all over the place, and they've got a different section of time with music, I think. If it's good music, they'll listen, much more varied than we had, as you say.
I mean, we would have never listened to our parents' music, really. Well, you did, because your parents were a bit more with it, I would suggest to you. My parents were sort of light bloody Gilbert and Sullivan and stuff like that. God, I wasn't going to listen to Gilbert and Sullivan. I guess the only cool music that I had growing up at the same time in the background was Glenn Miller. All that swing was around.
Yeah. I was visiting my parents just the other week, and my dad and I we call it a YouTube off, which is where, we do that in our family. You each get a turn at playing your favourite song and making everybody sit there and listen to it. We love it. Dad was showing me all his favourite opera singers, and it was because I had been showing him some of the fantastic talent here at the ARIA competition in Dunedin last year. Dad had listened to a podcast with a guy who's in Solomeo, who's put out a jazz album.
Yeah.
Is it Morris the Man or something like that? He had written it in an African country when he was having a break from classical music, and then he proceeded to show me all his favourite opera singers. Now, I've never liked women's voices, but he did convert me a little bit, so that was good. I do think that the tone of male opera singers is easier to listen to.
Oh, that's an interesting observation. There was La Stupenda was very popular in the 1960s, a female, Joan Sutherland, wasn't it? Do you remember her?
I know the name, but no, I don't remember her. And Dad's taste went back a bit too. Is it Onassis?
Yeah.
And what a voice. I mean, really, I had not seen her perform before. It's such a tragic life, because when you're doing these YouTube offs, you end up having a big conversation about the person, and you can hear the anguish in her voice, but such a beautiful way of being able to slide over the notes. And it reminded me a little bit of why I like Aretha Franklin, because she was just able to reach those high notes in a completely different genre, and her voice would slide over them effortlessly.
No, you're right. Now, unfortunately, back to reality, but it's nice to be able to escape into that sort of, that world in which the cares and troubles of the world just simply wash away. How long are we now? What's the election now? 33, 34 days away?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I know. That's the way I feel too.
I'm in the routine, so I'm not. I'm just in the present day at the moment. We just put on my red t-shirt, put on my walking shoes, and I'm out.
Can I ask what sort of reaction you're getting?
Look, really interesting. There's my view is there are a huge number of undecided voters at the moment. People have not, you and I are sort of ensconced in this world of politics and looking at all the headlines. Lots of people have not turned their mind to it, and we're almost apologetic. I guess that's the southern politeness, because they've got busy lives. They're just starting to think about it, which is really interesting. I was in Milton yesterday doing business door knocks, went into my favourite antique shop there, run by a woman who is a true blue National supporter, and we always have a laugh about it. And the National Party candidate was there. We took a photo. We swap
That's
phone
nice.
numbers so we can
That's
keep
good.
each other informed about the damaged hoardings that are happening. And, we've got a really good style of campaigning here in the south, but I don't believe it's like that in the rest of New Zealand.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. And you want to get on with the rival candidates, and you're all in the same game together. And, yeah, no, it is cool. Listen, how many people have told you, though, Ingrid, I'm voting for you, but I'm not voting for your party?
It's interesting. I'm not getting a huge number of split votes. I got a few last night. But most people, I think, because of that, the fact that they're not deeply embedded in the conversations, are thinking of their ticks going one way or the other. That was what I encountered last election as well, and that was with the big Jacinda wave. People who are a bit more informed, some of them are splitting their votes, and they also happen to sort of understand what the party vote means more compared to the candidate vote than some other people that I'm speaking with.
All right. There's another poll that came out yesterday that isn't good news for you. I have to be honest with you. If I was in your position, I know you're not going to be because you're being professionally chipper at the moment, I'd be a bit depressed. This is the Talbot Mills poll. The really interesting thing, so listen, I'll get a standard response from you, Ingrid, so I'm not meaning to insult you, but I won't explore that issue. The thing that is coming out, though, is that New Zealand First is really starting to consistently breach that 5%. I don't think I've seen a poll in which they're not 5% in the last wee while. Does that interest and intrigue you?
On the periphery, I'm just getting on with my job, as I know you'd expect me to say. However, it is relevant given that we have rolled out working with them, and also the sector of the three right-wing parties. I would put New Zealand First in that basket, having to work together. Now, I can imagine New Zealand National working with either of the other parties, but the idea of ACT and New Zealand First working together is quite interesting, particularly given the animosity between the two leaders.
I can see that. But I'm interested also in the fact that, do you think it wasn't such a great idea to rule New Zealand First out, given where they are?
Not at all. Not at all. I think that voters deserve to know what the likelihood is of a coalition, given that that is the scenario this year, so that they can vote strategically and make the most informed choice. It's the right thing to do for voters.
All right. Now, okay, well, yes, you're right. You're right in that sense. I mean, there's a clear centre right and a clear centre left, and I don't think you could confuse the two of them just at the moment. Now, the other thing that I was just introduced by a Tova O'Brien, who I've always regarded as, to be perfectly honest with you, a bit more on the liberal left side than on the right side, conservative side, has written this piece and stuff saying that Chris Hipkins has changed. She says that the campaign is bearing down on him. He's got the look of a beaten man. Is that what you see?
Not at all. No. Look, the way to win elections is to take each day as it comes. We are listening to the people on the ground, and as I say, if there were more people who had already determined their vote, that might be true. But I am really getting that most people that we speak to at the moment are not quite sure. So some of them, I think, are Labour voters, have voted Labour previously, not quite sure, probably will. Some are saying they've always been swing voters, they're not sure yet. I am encouraging them to watch the Leaders debate, because I think that's going to be a significant point in this campaign when, it will come down to who do you want to be Prime Minister. And those Leaders debates are robust and long enough for people to get a sense of whether people can, whether the leaders speak in sound bites, whether they actually have some depth of understanding and a value base for what they're saying. So that's my encouragement to those swing voters currently.